And in other news tonight, the grandson of Ernest Hemingway, a writer in his own right, John Hemingway, has expanded into podcasting.
And hello. This is Hemingway's Parlay, and today our guest is Phil Greene. And Phil is going to talk to us about his books, but more than books, it's going to be, shall we say, getting drunk? Because he's a genius. He knows everything about cocktails, folks. This guy, believe it or not, you might not have even heard about this, but there is an American cocktail museum in New Orleans.
Where else? Yeah.
Well, it could be with every other museum in Washington.
Yeah,
we're going to be celebrating our 20th anniversary later this year. So
20 years.
I'm amazed. I'm just reading your latest book, the one about Manhattan, and the level of research there is top notch. I mean, I actually studied history back when they used to teach, and it wasn't a madrasa at UCLA. But this man has got the stuff. So, Phil, let's get right to the nitty gritty. When did you discover my grandfather and his writings? When did you get out of the rock?
I was in high school. I think it was freshman year, 9th grade. We were assigned Big Two-Hearted River to read, and it must have been sophomore year, because freshman year I went on a 6-day backpacking trip, and my pack was way too heavy. I probably weighed 120 pounds back then, and my pack, I remember, weighed 45 pounds because it was full of canned food. Like an idiot, I packed canned spaghetti and meatballs, which is exactly what Nick Adams packed, and he mixed it with
did he have Chef
pork and
Boyardee?
beans. I did. Yeah, I'm not a Franco-American guy. But when I read Big Two-Hearted River, I love trout fishing. I love backpacking, camping, and he described everything so vividly. I thought, wow, this is a writer I could connect with. The way he described the smell of the campfire, or the way the food tasted after a long day of backpacking, and when he said, I have a right to eat this stuff if I'm willing to carry it. And that's exactly how I felt, even though it was very foolhardy. And I started, seeking out other things of his to read. And over the years, I just started collecting more and more bits and pieces of the ways in which he described food and drink. I always found it compelling. And another author, Ian Fleming, did the same thing. He described the way a gin and tonic tasted, or that sort of thing. And so I just started keeping track of all these things, and learning more and more about his fascinating life. And on our honeymoon, we went to Key West for part of the time, and I toured his house there. And in the summer of 1989, I'm reading Islands in the Stream, and I'm visiting my future in-laws. My wife and I were only dating at the time. They live on Sanibel Island. So here I am reading Islands in the Stream, and Tom Hudson invents a drink made with lime juice, gin, coconut water, and Angostura bitters. And I'm sitting there in their yard, and I'm looking over here, and there's a lime tree, and over here there's a coconut palm. And inside the house they have Angostura bitters and they have gin. And I thought, damn it, I'm going to make that drink. And they must have thought I was nuts, because here I am trying to throw old coconuts to knock down green coconuts, and then I'm drilling holes in it because I don't have a machete handy. But I made the drink. I had to strain the coconut water through a coffee filter because the drill bit had, put a lot of sawdust into the coconut water. But from that point on, I just had the idea, you should collect all these recipes and all these drink references, the Jack Rose in The Sun Also Rises and figure out how to make these drinks. And I got tired of reading factually incorrect magazine articles about, oh, this is Hemingway's favorite drink and his favorite bar. So I said, I'm going to write the quintessential, complete bartender's guide to Hemingway. And I managed to convince Penguin that it was a good idea. And the book came out in 2012. And so it was a lot of fun. So short answer, right?
Did my brother Edward have anything to do either with the first or the second edition of your first book?
No, I don't think so.
He did some drawings or sketches or something like that.
No. Okay. There's a book called Hemingway and Bailey's Guide to the Favorite Drinks of American Writers.
Okay, that was the one. Yeah.
That's the book you're thinking about. And yeah, it's beautifully illustrated. And but I think they assigned the mojito to your grandfather. And I have spent a lot of time debunking the myth that he didn't drink mojitos. He probably never set foot in La Bodeguita del Medio in Havana. The writing on the wall that says, my daiquiri at El Floridita, my mojito at La Bodeguita, was a forgery.
I'm sure he must have gone there at least.
Well, Valerie says she doesn't remember him ever going there, but who knows?
Was she always with him?
Oh, I know. You can't prove a negative. That's what I've come to. But there was a Fernando Campo Amor was a publicist for Bacardi, and he was a friend of Hemingway's, and he admitted this was a forgery. We hired a graphic artist. I had some of Hemingway's writings because we exchanged letters from time to time, and we had this graphic artist replicate his handwriting, his distinctive handwriting, and it was a publicity stunt to get people to come into the bar. And 60 years later, it's still working like a charm. I mean, I think the Pope has even been there to have his Hemingway mojito. But as I set out to prove in To Have and Have Another Hemingway Cocktail Companion, he tended to write about drinks that he was fond of. You know, the Negroni, the daiquiri, the martini, the whiskey and soda is all over the place. He never wrote about the mojito, and he didn't like sweet drinks. He was diabetic or pre-diabetic, and the last drink with any added sugar that he ever wrote about was probably the Jack Rose, and that was 1926. You know, The Sun Also Rises, when he was only 26 years old himself, 27. So
yeah, Lester also had diabetes too.
Sorry?
His brother Lester.
Oh.
In the end, I think they were going to have to amputate his legs. Diabetes or something. So that's when he decided to end it all. Yes.
And his
So
father,
Phil, how many books do you have currently out there on?
4 out there right now, with 1 more in the pipeline. So the first book was To Have and Have Another Hemingway Cocktail Companion, followed by The Manhattan, which came out in 2016. And then in 2018, A Drinkable Feast, A Cocktail Companion to 1920s Paris. And John wrote the foreword for that one. Did a great job. Then 2022, we had the, there you go. Book on the right is Cheers. Cheers is a lot of fun, and it's probably my most accessible book because you don't have to care about Hemingway or the Manhattan or Paris in the 1920s. For every day of the year, you open it up. Let's say you want to look up your birthday or January 23rd. What happened on this date? So for every day of the year, there's an event worth celebrating, a drink connected to it, a toast or a quote, and a song or a video to enjoy while making the drink, enjoying the drink. So let's say January 23rd, you open it up. What happened on this date? Let's have a drink today. What are we celebrating? The movie Casablanca made its debut. Oh, great movie. Love that movie. I'll drink to that. Okay, what are we drinking? We're drinking the French 75 because it's featured in the film. The girl Yvonne, who's been jilted by Rick, comes in with a German officer. Not a good look for a French girl. You know, she's going to be accused of being a horizontal collaborator, and maybe after the war they're going to shave her head. Who knows? But she decides she's got to get drunk to endure an evening with a German officer. So she says, French 75s, line them up from here to here. She's going to have a bunch of French 75s. What's our toast? Here's looking at you, kid, of course. And what's the song we're going to listen to as time goes by? You must remember this, So for every day of the year, there are those 4 elements. And it's a lot of fun.
Cool.
I even threw one in there for leap year. So there are 366
cool.
stories, 366 drinks, 366 toasts or quotes, songs or videos. So it's a lot of fun. I'll have to send you a copy, John.
Yes, and autograph it.
Yeah.
Because then I could sell it on eBay. No.
There you go. I have 2 copies of my Hemingway book signed by your Uncle Patrick that people have given to me. And it was awfully kind of him to sign my book, but he's a lovely old guy. I hope he's doing well.
Hey, he's still there. He's got staying power. I can say he's like 95 or 96.
Yeah, he was born in the summer of 28. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good year for Hemingway's, I guess. So, next question is, how did you go from making your own drink to becoming a cocktail historian?
Well,
that's rather unique, I'd say.
Yeah, it helped a lot having gone to law school. I went to Loyola University, New Orleans, and being 20-something years old, living in New Orleans that has such an amazing food and drink culture, and being a history major, history buff, I soaked it up. I mean, all the stories behind the invention of Oysters Rockefeller or the Sazerac or the Ramos Gin Fizz or the Hurricane, I was just a sucker for it. And I don't think the word foodie existed back then, but I was a foodie and a drinky. And so I fell in love with New Orleans. I knew my grandmother was born there. Her last name was Dupre. So 10 years after I graduated, 1996, I have a conversation with one of my uncles, and he says, you really should research our ancestry, because look at this family tree that I've started. One of our ancestors came to New Orleans from Martinique, and I was like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. And a lot of them go back to
maybe
it was Guadeloupe, actually.
From Canada or something.
No, it's funny. None of my French New Orleans ancestors were Acadians, Acadiana, Cajuns. Yeah. They all came either from Saint-Domingue, which is now Haiti, or they came from Guadeloupe, and they originated from either Paris or Bordeaux. So in researching my family tree, I discovered that one of my ancestors, my great-great-grandmother, her last name was Peychaud, Peychaud, and I should have a bottle of Peychaud's bitters. There's a brand of bitters made in New Orleans called Peychaud's, and I thought, well, I recognize that name, and I figured out that Antoine Amédée Peychaud, who was a Creole pharmacist, he invented those bitters in the 1850s. And they're essential to making a drink called the Sazerac, which is the official cocktail of New Orleans. And according to New Orleans folklore, and they still tell the story down there, the word cocktail was invented, and the actual very first cocktail was invented in New Orleans. And you know how cities love their folklore. According to the story, Antoine Peychaud was a pharmacist in New Orleans, which he was, and he used to serve his bitters with cognac and a little bit of sugar and a little bit of water in an hourglass-shaped egg cup. If you eat a soft-boiled egg, you put it in one of these little egg cups, and in French, it's called a coquetier. And as more Americans would come into his shop and say, well, what's that? He'd say, it's a coquetier. They blurred that word, just like Acadian became Cajun, that word became cocktail. So that's the story, and it's been around since 1937. And allegedly, that serving of Peychaud's bitters and a little sugar, a little water, and cognac became known as the Sazerac cocktail, because there was a brand of cognac called Sazerac, which came from Limoges. So there's a lot of truth in the story, a lot of not so much truth in the story. The problem with the story is it presumes that Peychaud was an adult when he came to this country from what is now Haiti during the slave rebellions. Well, the slave rebellion started in the 1790s and culminated in the independence of Haiti in 1804. Researching his life, I discovered he was born in 1803. Well, the first time the word cocktail appears in print with a definition next to it was 1806. So he's 3 years old inventing the cocktail. I don't think so.
I mean, it's New
So
Orleans, but
yeah, I know. He's a very precocious little lad. I found newspaper articles, advertisements in New Orleans from the 1850s where he's advertising his bitters, and in the 1830s where he's opening up his pharmacy, 1834 to be exact. But it all post dates the invention of the cocktail or the derivation of the word. So it's kind of like saying, I'm the great, 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 great grandson of Christopher Columbus, and I've discovered that the Vikings got here first. So I sort of had to debunk the myth that made me pretty cool for about 10 minutes, that I descend from the creator of the cocktail. Well, no, not so fast. The word was already out there.
Too. Yeah.
What's that?
Maybe you're Danish or Swedish.
Yeah, that's right. The ancestry.com tells me I'm part Swedish, so I got that going for me. Anyway, so Peychaud was an important character in cocktail history because his bitters were used in the Sazerac cocktail, but the Sazerac cocktail probably wasn't invented until the 1890s. So anyway, having done all this research on New Orleans food and drink and the Sazerac in particular, Peychaud's bitters in particular, sort of put me on the map as a New Orleans cocktail expert. And I was lucky enough to fall in with a group of people exactly 20 years ago. I attended an event called Tales of the Cocktail. It's a really cool, like a cocktail festival. It's held in New Orleans every year since something like 2002. And by attending this event, doing a seminar on the life and times and folklore of Antoine Peychaud, I fell in with a group of cocktail historians and bartenders. And so you got Dale DeGroff, Jill DeGroff, Ted Hay, Robert Hess, Chris and Laura McMillan, Anastasia Miller, and Jared Brown. And we put our heads together and 20 years ago founded the Museum of the American Cocktail. And we had our grand opening in the French Quarter on the third floor of the New Orleans Pharmacy Museum, which you should go to next time you're there. It's right next to the Napoleon House, where I got engaged, by the way. And we were in the Pharmacy Museum for all of 2005. Unfortunately, a little thing called Hurricane Katrina occurred in August of 2005. So we had to pack up and move our exhibit to Las Vegas. There used to be a Commander's Palace there. And then we moved back to New Orleans in 2008, and that's where we've been ever since.
So it was from that meeting of all those people there, that yearly event, that you and someone else decided to create the Cocktail Museum.
Right. Very fortuitous getting together with all those folks. Dale DeGroff is known as the king of cocktails. He's the head of the museum. He's one of the people who are instrumental in the current cocktail renaissance that we're now enjoying, because he was the head bartender at the Rainbow Room going back to the late 80s, and sort of put craft cocktails back on the map using fresh ingredients, not artificial sour mix out of a gun, that sort of thing. And he sort of led one of the leaders of getting cocktails back to how they were made traditionally. You can look at food and drink in general and just see how John, you and I are about the same age. We grew up eating Wonder Bread and eating iceberg lettuce, and coffee was granulated instant coffee. I mean, we weren't food snobs. Tang, exactly. It was good enough for the astronauts. I mean, would you make a mimosa with Tang? Of course not. You use freshly squeezed orange juice. So we've gotten back to the way food and drink should be presented. World War II brought us automation and mass production, and that's fine. But we can do better when it comes to food and drink. We understand what a good cup of coffee tastes like, or artisan bread, and so we're rediscovering cocktail bitters. We're rediscovering all sorts of things that were very commonplace before Prohibition. Prohibition came along and kind of all the craft went out of drinking. It was all about how do we get drunk? How do we make this unpalatable bathtub gin taste a little bit better? Well, let's just mask it with ginger ale or something like that. And then again, the mass production of the food and drink industry made everything sort of homogenized. And over the last 20 years, 25 years, we've gotten back into making food and drink the way that it's supposed to be made, with fresh ingredients. And there are a lot of great stories associated with drinks. And I try to tell them, and I try to set the record straight on a lot of them. And that's, you're pouring, you're churning through my Manhattan book. I tried to debunk a few of the myths surrounding that. One of the stories, probably the most popular story of the Manhattan, was that it was invented by Winston Churchill's mother. And it's a great story. And her father was one of the officers of the Manhattan Club, but she was actually in London giving birth to Winston at the time this great party was held at the Manhattan Club, December 29th of 1874, to celebrate the election of Samuel Tilden to the office of governor of New York. Now, it's not to say she could have written down the recipe and then hopped on the boat to go to London. Who knows? But it's all great folklore.
Well, in the photo that you have of her, she looks fairly young and enterprising.
Yeah.
So she would have had the strength to cross the Atlantic on.
Yeah.
It's strange how the folklore, and it's not just in drinks, but it's strange how the folklore, as things get handed down through generations, and the stories of everything as they get handed down. Something that's near and dear to your heart, I'm sure, is near and dear to mine, is the with the Marine Corps and the myth of the term devil dog and where it came from. It actually came from way earlier than the battle at in the Argonne. And
really?
It was published in the newspaper towards the beginning of the war.
Wow.
And actually, yeah. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, so the myth carries on, like, with her. There are little things here and there that we just, that blows the whole myth out of the water as soon as you see it. And you're like, no, don't tell anybody about that. Don't
well,
let it
now
live.
you've piqued my interest. Yeah, because the official story is that the Germans were so impressed with the fighting tenacity of the Marines at Belleau Wood that they called them Teufelhunden, which in German means devil dog or hounds of hell or something like that. But now, of course, we weren't in the war until what, 1916 or 17? Yeah. So you're saying the term existed prior to that. I gotta look that up. Send me what you have.
I'll send you. Yeah, I'll send you the link to another podcast. Not that I want to go ahead and advertise somebody else's podcast, but the guy's considered to be the foremost expert on World War I.
Wow.
His name is Greg Jackson, and he does a lot of he's got a podcast that's just history, and he did one specifically on the battle, and I'm sitting there the whole time I'm driving, I'm listening to them, like, no, I mean, I feel tears coming. No, this is not how this worked.
Wow.
It just debunks the myth.
Well, that's my day job. I'm the trademark attorney for the Marine Corps, and I've registered devil dog in a number of classes. And of course, devil dog is one of those terms that we share with other people, because I grew up eating these little snack cakes called devil dogs. They're like ho-hos, Hostess ho-hos, Drake's devil dogs, never knowing that years later I would register it as a trademark for the United States Marine Corps. But yeah, I got to look that up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll send you the link to his podcast, but it's the little things that carry on down, like the mojito.
Oh yeah,
being Hemingway's favorite drink. It's just fascinating.
A lot of people say that Paris was his favorite city, but apparently it wasn't. In one of these conferences, my dad said, "No, it's Venezia. It's always been Venezia."
Yeah, I mean, you could say it's Havana. You could say it's but he loved Paris. He had 4 wives. Maybe he had 4 favorite cities. What's that?
He loved Venezia even more.
Could be. When he
maybe this is just my dad trying to sort of throw.
Well, across the river and into the trees, you've got Colonel Cantwell, who's got a heart condition, and he's walking across Venice, and he makes it to Harry's Bar, and he was home. He was home again, being back in Harry's Bar, where you can have yet another martini. He called them the Montgomery Martini because it was 15-1 gin to vermouth. Why Montgomery? Well, he wasn't impressed with Bernard Law Montgomery, Field Marshal Montgomery, who he believed had to have a 15-1 troop advantage before he committed them to battle. So he named the Montgomery Martini after him, 15-1 gin to vermouth. So.
Have you been writing books about, or you even, I don't know, pieces for magazines about other American or British writers?
That's I mean, I've done presentations. I've written about Ian Fleming and his favorite drinks. There are a couple books out there that purport to be, a James Bond 007 Ian Fleming cocktail companion. I think it can be done better, but I've done seminars and I've done some writing on, across the board literary characters and their favorite drinks.
I think Fitzgerald would be a good,
Yeah,
good one.
except, I struggle with, I've had people say to me, well, how could you celebrate Hemingway's drinking? He was an alcoholic and it shortened his life. And you can't, to me, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, sure. You look at pictures of, I'm 62 and I made it to 62. Your grandfather didn't, and he looked 92 at the end. And did alcohol have anything to do with that?
Yeah,
Perhaps.
I think it was
Electroshock therapy, just the wear and tear of the active life that he had.
what happened to him also in the First World War.
Yeah, the concussion.
Died there in that trench.
But Fitzgerald, Scott, and I can see a Scott and Zelda cocktail companion. Scott, I think, had more of a problem than your grandfather did. It was more, it took more. He was 40 something when he died. But there are a lot of great drink references in his works. The Gin Ricky, of course, is featured in The Great Gatsby. They accidentally let their daughter Scotty drink a gin fizz, thinking it was lemonade. There are a lot of great stories. They love the orange blossom. That was their drink back during the Prohibition, because the orange blossom is nothing more than gin and orange juice, and I guess it was a good way to mask the flavor of bootleg gin, to just dilute it with orange juice.
It's curious, because if you think about it, that probably was the greatest generation of American writers it ever was, and almost to a man and a woman, they were all alcoholics. Thomas Wolfe,
Yeah, I mean, Dos Passos drank, but I don't think he drank to excess. Dorothy Parker, of course. Faulkner, my God. I mean, Faulkner would just get blackout drunk.
Faulkner had blood in his alcohol stream.
He passed out one time, slumped against the radiator, and woke up with third degree burns.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just.
They asked him what happened. He said, "I was trying to get a suntan."
Yeah, but it's funny when you look at the approach that Ernest Hemingway took to alcohol in his writing. And Fitzgerald, I think, knew he had a problem, and it was taking a toll on him, and it comes out in his writings. You've got his second novel, The Beautiful and the Damned. The protagonist is a wreck by the end of the book, just from drinking too much. And Babylon Revisited is a story of someone who just let alcohol take over his life, and he lost his wife, and he's lost custody of his kids, and he's trying to come to terms with it. Only allows himself one drink a day. But with Hemingway, the protagonist maybe drinks too much, who knows, but he'll never admit it. He always acts like, I've got this under control. And Islands in the Stream, he learns of the terrible news of a car accident which took his first wife and two sons. And he gets on an ocean liner to cross the ocean to go to the funeral. And he steals himself by drinking scotch and soda. And he says, I'll work it out in the gym tomorrow. I'll just sweat it out tomorrow in the gym on the steamship. It's always the minor characters who are rummies, not the protagonist. Jake Barnes can drink like a fish, but he's fine. Frederick Henry is in the hospital in Farewell to Arms. He drinks so much, he's turning yellow. He's got dysentery, but he's okay. He's fine. He'll be fine. It's sort of that stoic approach to, I can handle my drink. But Fitzgerald knew he couldn't, and it comes out in his writing. So I wrote an article in Daily Beast, if you want to look it up on that topic. It's pretty fascinating.
No, I could never drink like they did. I mean, and I had heart problems anyway when I was about 37, so I wasn't even drinking.
Well, your
I mean,
book Bacchanalia, that's I mean, the word says it all. I mean, they're putting those vodka tonics are, in Pamplona. They're
yeah, I
putting,
mean that's all they do there. And then afterwards they talk about, oh, I've got to go, detox, or something like that, or you really do. And no, I can't do that anymore. So.
when you get to Pamplona, you sign up for the liver, to get on a waiting list for a new liver. Is that how it is?
Yeah, or that I just said, like, grab a glass of water and maybe a couple of ice cubes in it or something like that to make it look like I'm having a gin tonic or something.
There you go.
That's what I
Lemon
do.
or lime wedge, yeah.
Lime wedge, yeah. There we go.
Well, the British like their lemon, so.
Yeah.
So
And no
getting
ice
back
cubes.
Alrighty. How did you get involved with the company, Tapas Pilar? I'm wearing some of their merch today.
Very, very, very good timing. So my Hemingway Cocktail Companion came out in November of 2012, and I was doing a book launch event in Florida. I think it was Fort Lauderdale at the Ritz-Carlton, and a few days before that, I was contacted by delightful young woman named Lindsay Copps, and she tells me,
Oh yeah, Lindsay.
you know Lindsay, and
Yes.
she says, I'm with the Hemingway Rum Company, and wow, look at the timing. You've got this book on Hemingway's drinks, and we're launching Papas Pilar, Hemingway Rum Company. This is a marriage made in heaven. And she was right. And I've been working with them since January or February of 2013. Still doing a lot of work with them, consulting on, they're determined to get the story right. And I think it's great because a lot of people don't care about the story. They want the folklore. And so I've had a great time working with them on new product launches, coming up with storylines for example, one of their blends of rum. It was named after one of the islands west of Key West, Marquesas blend. Yeah, Marquesas. So I came up with that storyline. And when they opened the distillery in Key West, you and I were there for that launch. I put together the photo display in the distillery. It's sort of the life of Hemingway through 16 or 18 photos, and if you flip it over, there's text on the back. The statue of Hemingway that now graces the bar. We wanted to make sure if the wristwatch was correct, or the belt that he wore, or the shirt. I can never pronounce it correctly. Gayabara. It was, you don't tuck them in, but we wanted to make sure the belt was correct because he actually had a belt that he took off of a dead German in World War II. We decided not to go with that one because it might be politically.
Well, he could have just used a piece of rope because apparently, when he was in Italy after the war was over, and he went up to the area which was near. Anyway, it was in Liguria, but as you're going up towards France there and everything, he couldn't find a belt, and so he just got this piece of twine or something like that, and put it through the little loops in his pants.
And he had this funny habit of wearing his belt out. He didn't bother with belt loops. He would just fasten the belt around, kind of cinch it up around his waist, and he didn't care about the belt loops. So.
No. Lester was like that too. Yeah, it was kind of sort of primitive. I mean, they could dress up. I mean, he had pictures of the time when he went to see Lyndon Johnson, no less. And there was a picture of him and the president. And for some reason, they hung it up in the bathroom there in their house in San Marino Island.
This is Lester?
Yeah, Lester.
Huh. He was a character. Didn't he try to build an island in the Atlantic and start his own country?
Basically, yeah, it was called New Atlantis. And, his wife, at a certain point, took whatever was left before it was sunk into the Gulf Stream so that she could buy the house that they had.
We gave the Chinese the idea of, building an island, but anyway.
The statue, by the way, here, I've got a picture of it. I'll pull up here. This is
Ah,
me 75 pounds ago, and my friend
wow.
Gus, who is also a former Marine.
Oh
He's
my
with the
God.
State Department now. And then
Wow.
this is the Hemingway statue in question.
Yeah.
And the gentleman who they modeled this after, his name is Tim. He's a friend of mine. He actually lives in Key West.
Wow.
It's a
He's
lot
one of the
better
lookalikes
than
with us.
some statues I've seen, which have got awful. But anyway, this one's not bad. If you ever get a chance to go to Pamplona, they have a bar there right next to the what was that place called there? It was where the fascists got together to plan the war before it started there in Pamplona. At any rate, there's another bar which is right next to it. It's very small, and it has a life-size picture of him. Dead ringer for it. I remember
Huh.
once I took a picture next to it, and I was in the middle, and then my son was on the other side, so we had descending generations there.
Wow. Cool.
Kind of cool.
Haven't been to Pamplona yet. I've only been to Barcelona a couple times, but
Oh my God, the one that they have there where you're going this weekend there, Christopher, is the worst I've ever seen. There in town. Not there by the hotel, but in town. It's almost like-
Up in Petoskey.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm at a Phil. I'm at a writers' conference this weekend up in Wallen Lake, which is
Yeah.
like Charlevoix.
oh, I've done an event there at
Okay.
the inn. We're
Beautiful
building a house
place.
right near there in Northport. It'll be
Oh,
writing about.
okay.
Yeah, beautiful country.
Well, we do a writers' conference up there. This is going to be the third annual one here this weekend, and we do the whole walking tour and sit at the annex, but it's the city grill, so everybody gets their picture, in the seat and that kind of thing. And I really don't want to dispel the people at the city grill about the burn. I mean, the seat, sure, we're good. There's a seat there. I'll pull up the picture here in a second for everybody out there. But there's a burn on the corner that's supposedly where Hemingway put his cigar. There are no pictures of Ernest Hemingway with a cigar, with the exception of one, and it was not lit, and it was with Fidel Castro, who gave him said cigar.
Well, that doesn't prevent a brand of cigars that I think they're called Hemingways.
The Fuentes. Yep.
Yeah,
I think they were from Costa Rica or someplace like that.
it could be. Also, the sign outside the annex, which is now called the City Park, City Park Grill.
The City Park Grill.
It says that the annex was the basis or the locale in the story, A Man of the World.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you read that story, it talks about two bars in a town called the Pilot and the Index, two different bars. Well, Pilot and Index are two mountains right next to each other in northern Wyoming, right near Cook City, Montana, just across the border from Cook City, Montana. Starting in the late 20s, Hemingway would go to the El Bartee ranch and spend his summers to escape the heat of Key West. And the mountains Pilot and Index were always in the background. And the two bars that are believed to be the basis of the stories are actually the Rough Rider, and there are two bars in Cook City that are probably the basis of those bars, not any place in Petoskey. But what are you going to do? I mean, there's a plaque on an apartment that he and Hadley lived in Chicago right after they got married. So they got married at Horton Bay in September of 1921. And they were in Chicago for a couple months, and then they moved to Paris. And they spent their honeymoon on Walloon Lake. Well, if you go to the apartment, it's on the market right now in Chicago. There's a plaque that says Ernest and Hadley Hemingway lived here after their marriage and after their honeymoon in Wisconsin. It's like, you spent all the money to put up a plaque and you don't even get the
didn't do the research.
I don't even know that he ever went to he probably went to Wisconsin because it's just north of Chicago in Oak Park, but he did not honeymoon in Wisconsin. But what are you going to do? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, there's that one. And then I don't remember where my next one is here.
So what would you say is the most enjoyable, enlightening experience out of all things that you have come into contact with?
Meeting you, of course.
Me?
No. I tell you what, I've had a lot of fun. I mean, I've done my Hemingway seminar in New Zealand. I've been the Toastmaster for the OSS Society. I met your I guess your half brother Sean at one of
Sean, yeah.
those dinners, along with Marlena Dietrich's daughter. Um, I've been all over the place. I've been to Wyoming. I've been to Key West multiple times.
Have you seen the new Hemingway bar at the Ritz?
I've met Colin Field at the Ritz Paris. He's become a good friend. My wife and I went there for drinks in 2017, and he came out from behind the bar and he took me up the street to a place called the Hole in the Wall, which it used to be a bar called the Hole in the Wall. Now it's a ramen noodle restaurant. But according to folklore, so this part's true. When Hemingway wrote The Sun Also Rises, he all of the characters were based on people he knew in Paris, and a lot of them weren't too favorably, replicated. Namely, Harold Loeb, who was the model for Robert Cohn. And Harold Loeb was so upset at the way he was portrayed, he put the word out on the street that next time I see Hemingway, I'm going to kill him, And the bartender at the Dingo, Jimmy Charters, referred to it as six characters in search of an author
Who they want to kill.
With a gun, something like that, because Loeb said he was going to kill Hemingway. So Hemingway put word out on the street that I will be at the Brasserie Lippe, or else I will be at the Hole in the Wall. And if anybody wants to come, beat me up or shoot me, come have it. I'm here waiting. And Harold Loeb finally did bump into him one night, and they shook hands. And then he forgot that he was holding a grudge against him. And as he wrote in a letter to Fitzgerald, he said, "No bullets whistled." In other words, nobody shot at me for having portrayed them negatively. If it was Harold Stearns or any number of people were lampooned in the book. Duff Twisden became Lady Brett Ashley. In making up these characters, he took liberties with his friends. So
yeah, lost a lot of friends probably doing that book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say, for argument's sake here, before we wander too far away, folks, I apologize for all of the noise in the background whenever I happen to be talking. We sprung a leak last night and we're fixing things. This is the plaque you were talking about.
Yep.
Michigan.
Yeah, it's in Petoskey, Michigan. It's a nice little place, a man of the world. It talks about it was the basis for the bar. Well, the annex likely served as inspiration for the saloon in Hemingway's story, A Man of the World. But there were two different bars in that story, Pilot and in the Index, and they're both named after mountains in northern Wyoming, right near Yellowstone. So you can't prove a negative, but I doubt that that's the origin of the bar.
And then this is supposedly the hole from where Hemingway's cigar burned down, and then right about here is where the typewriter would have sat.
Of course.
When he wrote there, supposedly.
Yeah.
But he never smoked cigars.
Did he smoke cigarettes? I don't think.
There's a picture of him and Hadley, and he's holding a cigarette.
Yeah.
And I think he once said, "I gave up cigarettes because it was ruining my palate, my taste buds, and I couldn't enjoy the taste of wine if I was smoking." So he quit smoking. But it was something he dallied with, I guess, when he was a teenager or in his 20s. But I don't know that he was ever a big cigar smoker. I don't think he was.
No, I don't think so. I can't even think of any sort of picture. That one from Cuba that Fidel had given him. But aside from that, I don't think he had a picture of him smoking a cigar. I mean, how did you think that you, of all people, would end up becoming a writer and who does what you do quite well? I mean, you created your own niche, but I know that in the book that I'm reading now, there are plenty of other people who've been writing books, companions of this sort of stuff. But the way that you write it, okay, isn't just, factual this or factual that. You put a lot of humor in your books. So I want everyone who's listening to this to know that you're in for a treat when you pick up one of Phil Greene's books.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's got his own style, and it's really good.
Thank you. I've always enjoyed writing. I wrote some humor feature stories for a college newspaper when I was in college. I was a features editor, and all through my 20s and 30s and 40s, I wanted to write. And I just never knew what to write. I didn't feel like I had a novel in me. My Christmas letters were legendary. They were hilarious, or the emails that I would send out to the parents of the soccer team. Everybody thought they were hilarious. And then they were like, "You're such a funny writer." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I need a vehicle. I don't know what to write." And it wasn't until Cocktail History came along that I found my muse. I found, oh, there are people who like Cocktail History, and I'd like to interject my sense of humor in there. And it's funny because I wanted to write like Hemingway. I couldn't, so I wrote about Hemingway. But that book sort of put me on the map, and the Manhattan opportunity came to me. I never thought I'd write about the Manhattan, but when you look at the Manhattan, it's such an important drink because it's the first time bartenders discovered this obscure ingredient coming in from Italy called vermouth, and it's like, vermouth, where have you been all my life? It tastes so great with whiskey in the Manhattan. Let's try it with gin, and it became the Martinez or the Martini. Let's try it with Scotch, it became the Rob Roy. So just diving into that topic made me appreciate the role that vermouth played in bartending, and we've seen it in our lifetimes. Who heard of kombucha 10 years ago, or IPAs, or different things that we've come to appreciate, and they become standard. That's how we evolve in what we drink, is these new discoveries from other countries. Vermouth was discovered or invented in 1786 by Antonio Benedetto Carpano. And the funny thing is, Tony Bennett's real name is Antonio Benedetto, but he decided to take wine and fortify it with a little brandy and add herbs and spices and roots and barks, and that's all vermouth is. And news of this spread over to southeastern France, Chambéry, and they started making a drier form of vermouth. And these started coming across the ocean in the 1840s, 50s, 60s. And before you know it, vermouth is a staple in the American bar. And it's kind of a cool story. How many great drinks come from that marriage of spirit and vermouth?
I've had it in a margarita.
What's that?
I've had it in a margarita.
Never tried that.
It floored me. It's like, wait, what's in this?
Cool. Sweet or dry?
Sweet.
Interesting. No, if I come out with a second edition, I'll have to call you and put that recipe in there.
I'll have to reach out to my ex-wife. That might be a headache.
Oh, well. Okay. Well, Phil, it has been very enlightening, and been really good fun here having you as a guest.
Thank you,
John. It's been good fun having you here as a host. Knock it out, right, dude. No, seriously, you're gonna come down to Hemingway Day?
That's the plan. I'm supposed to do an event, I think Monday the 15th of July at the distillery, the Papas Pilar Hemingway Rum Company distillery, which is right at the corner of Greene, no relation.
Yeah.
And Simonton, I think.
Simonton. Yep.
Simonton. I think I've been there long enough.
You're only going to be there that one day, the 15th?
No, I hope to be there for several days, and I might even do another event. I'm trying to figure that out. There's a brand of absinthe called Death in the Afternoon, and they're obviously with a Hemingway connection, but they know not to use any Hemingway trademarks in their branding. But I might do an event with them as well. But I've never been to Hemingway Days because it always conflicted with Tales of the Cocktail, which I've been doing ever since 2004. But and I would love to see somebody win the lookalike competition, someone who actually looked like what Hemingway looked like when he lived in Key West.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I know that the guys would love. I'm going to make sure we swap phone numbers here. I know the guys would love to have a conversation with you about how to make some of these things from way back. And you won't be able to tell many of us apart because we all look a lot alike.
Well,
it's a thing.
the Papa Doble that they have at Sloppy Joe's, unfortunately, is an abomination, and it has all these sweeteners that Ernest Hemingway would never have tolerated. The Hemingway daiquiri is made with light rum, originally Bacardi, lime juice, grapefruit juice, maraschino liqueur. That's it. And they add like triple sec and also I forget what else, but they add a bunch of stuff that isn't in there. But what are you going to do? I'm sure they sell it by the they make a good bank on
By the gallon per hour, probably.
Yeah.
So Phil, for the people who are just simply listening to us, your website, www.philip with one L and two P's, PHILIP Greene with an E at the end. That's philipjgreen.com. You're also over on Instagram. Same thing, at Philip J. Greene.